Okay, so what happens when a 60-year-old water treaty, one that's held firm between two nuclear-armed neighbors, suddenly finds itself on the brink of collapse? We're diving into a story of water, of law, and some pretty high-stakes geopolitics. And really, it all boils down to one massive question. Can a lifeline for millions of people just be put on hold?
When India's prime minister said this, it wasn't just tough talk. It was a signal that things are about to get serious. All those years of simmering disagreements, well, they were about to boil over, and that led to a move that nobody really saw coming. So let's get right into it.
All right, so let's fast forward to April 2025. Things really came to a head. After a cross-border security incident, which our sources call the Pahalgam attack, India did something pretty drastic. It took a step that put the entire Indus Waters Treaty, you'll hear it called the IWT, in some serious jeopardy.
And this right here. This is the absolute core of the crisis. On April 24, 2025, India made this unilateral declaration that the treaty would be held in abeyance. Now, that single word, abeyance, kicked off a huge debate among international law experts. And the question they're all asking is, can one country just pause a vital international agreement all by itself? Okay, to really get what's at stake here, we need to back up a little and talk about what this treaty actually is. Because for more than 60 years, it's been so much more than just a piece of paper. Think of it as a framework, a kind of rulebook for peace and stability in a region that's, well, pretty volatile. What's truly remarkable about this treaty is just how resilient it's been. The World Bank helped broker it way back in 1960, and since then, it has survived multiple full-blown wars. It's been the one constant, even when all other diplomatic ties were completely cut off. So when you think about that long history of just holding on, it really shows you why India's 2025 declaration is so alarming. And this is why it matters so much. This isn't just about politics or some high-level maneuvering. We're talking about the Indus River system. It is a genuine lifeline for millions and millions of people. It supports their farms, it provides their drinking water, and it literally fuels the economies in both India and Pakistan. So, the big question is, how did we even get here? Well, as you can probably guess, there are two very different ways of looking at this. Two nations, two totally different perspectives on what should happen next. So, let's break down the main arguments from both sides based on what the source material tells us. Okay, so on India's side, the argument is that the treaty is just outdated. They're pointing to huge changes in things like population, climate change, security, you name it. And they're also claiming that Pakistan has been dragging its feet on resolving disputes. Then, on Pakistan's side, they're saying, whoa, hold on. They see the treaty as totally effective and argue that the rulebook already has ways to handle any new issues that pop up, like through something called the Permanent Indus Commission. And a major flashpoint, a real source of tension, has been the design of these big Indian hydroelectric projects. You see, India wants more freedom to build things for development and for clean energy. But Pakistan is worried that these dams could basically give India a hand on the tap, the ability to control the river flows, and that's a huge threat to their water security. These kinds of technical arguments are right at the very heart of this whole conflict.
Which brings us right back to that big legal question. Can India actually do this? Is this declaration of abeyance even allowed under international law? Okay, this is where things get a little technical, but it's super important, so stick with me. First off, that word, abeyance, what does it even mean? Basically, it's a state of temporary disuse, like a pause. But here's the kicker, and this comes straight from the policy brief we're looking at. You won't find that word anywhere in the treaty itself. It's not a standard term in international law either. So it seems like using this very specific, legally fuzzy word was a strategic choice, to avoid using other words that have much clearer legal definitions and consequences.
See, the official legal term for pausing a treaty is suspension, but the bar to actually do that is incredibly high. According to the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, which is kind of the rule book for treaties, you can really only do it in two situations. Either everyone agrees to it, or the other side has committed what's called a material breach, like a really major violation. And the source material argues that, well, neither of those things happened here. Now, India has also brought up another argument. It's a legal doctrine called fundamental change of circumstances. The fancy Latin name for it is rebus sic stantibus. It's a mouthful, I know, but basically the argument is, hey, the world has changed so much since 1960 that the original deal just doesn't apply anymore. But, and this is a big but, The source points out this is a really risky legal play. In fact, that argument has never been successfully used to end a treaty at the International Court of Justice. Ever.
So you might be thinking, wait a minute, if neither India nor Pakistan are officially signed up for the Vienna Convention, why does it matter? Well, it's because international courts see it as the gold standard. Its principles, like needing everyone to agree to a suspension, are seen as customary international law, basically the unwritten rules everyone follows. And when you look at it through that lens, the analysis in the source material concludes that India's unilateral move just doesn't meet that widely accepted standard. Okay, so given this whole complicated legal mess, what are Pakistan's options? What can they do in response? Well, the policy brief we're examining lays out a few different paths forward.
The options really fall into three main buckets: legal, diplomatic, and strategic. Legally, they can use the treaty's own built-in rulebook for disputes, or even ask the International Court of Justice for an opinion. Diplomatically, they could ask the World Bank to step in and mediate, or even escalate it to the UN Security Council. And then there's the strategic route. Rally support from allies and make the case that, hey, this isn't just about us. This could set a dangerous precedent for the entire world.
153. Just a number on a screen, but what does it mean in this context?
Well, that's how many countries around the world share water basins that cross borders, just like the Indus. And that is why this whole situation matters way beyond just India and Pakistan. Because if one country can just decide to hit pause on a water treaty all by itself, it could set a really dangerous, even chaotic precedent for water cooperation everywhere. We're talking about something that could affect billions of people. And all of this leaves us with a really big and, frankly, pretty unsettling question for the future. In a world that's getting hotter and where water is becoming more scarce, can these decades-old treaties still hold up? Or are we watching right now as water becomes the new frontline in conflicts all over the globe?